Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krull, and today I'm going to be mansplaining to you the truth about the concept of soulmates. But first, could you just hit that like button for me? Thanks. But now the truth about this whole idea of soulmates is that if you are a spiritual person should be able to have a spiritual connection with lots of spiritual people. And there is no one person out there who is meant to fulfill that role alone for you. You are certainly not just one of two Platonic halves. This is just another one of many ancient mythos that sounds stupid by today's much more evolved intellectual standards of thinking. To think that you are only half of one real person is not only ludicrous, but the kind of thought that only someone with some sort of mental illness would think. And I'm sure that if any of you actually read Plato's Symposium and the myth that this idea comes from, you will agree that it is not rooted in any kind of science, logic, or reality. And is a completely ridiculous set of ideas that only a delusional or severely mentally handicapped person would believe. And to spend your life thinking of yourself as only half a person and searching for your mythical other half would be a wasted existence and a loss that only someone who has a serious set of emotional issues would consider worthwhile. Which leads me to my next point, which is that this idea of and want for a soulmate really actually comes from emotional neediness and attachment issues. So a person who wants that feels a need to have a much more ultimate form of attachment than the ones who have disappointed them in the past. Something as loving and maternal and emotionally supportive as your mother, and as magical and spiritual as a supernatural spirit or a unicorn or fairy, and as romantic as the girl from your dreams, or at least a girl from a romance film, and as sensual as a tantric masseuse or something like that. And this kind of romantic, magical thinking is also a sign of another mental health implication, which is narcissism. Unfortunately, I have to give you a reality check here, but to feel that the only type of relationship that you will settle for is one that is of the most spiritually ultimate nature, and that you and your partner's love is more spiritually special than anyone else's, and that you two have a much more meaningful bond than any other couple out there, is just a grandiose narcissistic delusion. You see, this type of delusional thinking or grandiose fantasizing, these are part of the neuroses of narcissism. And this sort of magical thinking that some unicorn is going to come and take you away from all the bad girls out there who only disappoint or hurt you. Someone who's going to finally get you because they are actually your other half. In reality, this is just magical thinking and narcissistic delusion. And the experience of these feelings and this becoming one with the person who you are falling in love with and are calling your soulmate now are what are called in psychology enmeshment and codependence. And these things are not healthy. And something else that is delusional about the soulmate concept is that people often talk about wanting to find a person who is just like them. I mean, maybe not in every way, but at least all of the right ways. And then is exactly opposite of them in all the right ways too, so that they're completely complementary with each other for the greatest compatibility, which seems like some sort of impossible equation that can't be stated in real terms, so it can only be stated in this kind of abstract, mystified, poetic nonsense by talking about yin and yang and the Platonic halves and such, because if we were to put it in more realistic terms, I mean, it wouldn't sound as good. And we could say something like that the chances of you meeting someone who is that ideal of a partner and having them be the opposite gender, which we know are predisposed to not be complementary to us, but very different from us in basically every way, including mostly ways that we hate. Are you an intellectual or a philosophy nerd like me? Do you enjoy contemplating things such as the meaning of life and what is beyond the ostensible reality that we appear to be in? And what are the mysteries of the universe? Do you like to read because you're smart and don't want to become a dumb illiterate, like all the retarded NPCs out there? Well then, I have the perfect book for you. The Bible of Esoteric Knowledge is a super concise, dense, info-packed philosophy textbook, written in the same verse format as the Bible, but combining multiple different, highly esoteric philosophies such as Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, shamanism, ancient paganism, and a special balance between theoretical physics and metaphysics, along with some special bonus info on the cryptic secrets of sexuality and death. This book will stimulate your intellectual philosopher's mind like no other, especially since it's a lot shorter and easier to read than most philosophy books made up entirely of run-on sentences and never-ending paragraphs, and, can be quite boring and exhaustive. Full of all the most fascinating mystical secrets of the universe, gratify your inner geek and quench your thirst for meaning with the Bible of Esoteric Knowledge. Get your copy at the link below for a special price today. Enlightenment has never been so easy. Finding someone who is going to be an ideal partner in spite of all that is incredibly improbable. Unless you have terribly low standards and in truth would really just settle for whatever girl you get and then call her your soulmate just because you're that desperate. And the feelings of her being a soulmate are actually just the extreme emotions produced by your desperation, which would then explain the delusional thinking, of course. And as a metaphysicist and religious scholar, I've spent my entire adult life in spiritual communities. And it is extremely hard to find good-looking spiritual girls who are still single, who can actually have an intellectual or philosophical conversation with you about spirituality enough to be able to form a spiritual connection with you. Most of them are just delusional sheep being told what to think by, some pastor or priest or guru or something. But luckily, if you are a spiritual person, you will find that you can connect with lots of other spiritualists, and that you will have lots of different types of spiritual connections and conversations with people throughout your life, which will be quite enlightening. But most of them will probably be with men, because we are the ones who possess the intellect for it. And I know you probably want to be able to have some sort of magical, spiritual sex with some sort of seductive, new age hippie chick or something like that because it's a fantasy of yours. And maybe if you go to enough festivals and carry psychedelics with you, you can make that dream a reality. But even if you do feel like you have a spiritual connection with a girl and have mystical coitus under the stars while on acid with some groovy jams droning in the background as your consciousness explodes into oneness with the cosmos, be sure to remember that this was all just an experience of the mind. It does not mean that the two of you are soulmates and have an ethereal connection that must be officiated through marriage or anything like that. Do not let the brain's capacity to produce these kinds of altered states, such as spirituality, love, and orgasm, and being high, fool you into the magical delusional thinking that causes you to overcommit, overinvest, and lose yourself in trying to become one with someone through narcissistic enmeshment and codependence, which may feel good at first, but they are very unhealthy and will lead you into a downward spiral of narcissistic collapse and heartbreak. After, of course, you build up this idea of being in an ultimate reality and living the love life of your dreams with your soul mate, only to have it all come crashing down when it is revealed to be no more than an illusion. But luckily for you, you have your own soul, and it is complete and whole in and of itself. So you don't need hers to be your soul mate. And it kind of sounds silly when you talk about it enough, doesn't it? Like, it really is just a ridiculous concept. So stop looking for your soulmate. Go your own way and live your own life as your own spiritual self. That concludes this talk. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If I did, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links below for more resources for your masculine self-development. And if you can afford to donate, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support funds me doing this work and fighting the good fight for men like you. And you can stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which will be a spiritual poem about masculinity for all of you spiritual men out there. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.